Rome's brutal secret, delicatus exposed. Why are there not more people talking about Rome's delicatus? You need to watch this if you struggle with imagining how power corrupts intimacy. The story of Rome is usually told in clean, polished strokes. Marble arches standing proud beneath the Mediterranean sun, generals marching in triumph, and emperors giving speeches on virtue, dignity, and the glory of civilization. But every bright empire casts a darker shadow. Welcome back to Shadows of History. If hidden truths and untold stories are your thing, you're in exactly the right place. Before we get started, hit subscribe, drop a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Big welcome to all the new faces. And to my returning viewers, you're the legends keeping this going. Now let's jump straight into today's story. It's a good one. This is the story of that shadow. A truth rarely spoken in classrooms or tourist guides. A truth whispered between lines of ancient texts, hinted at by poets, mocked by satirists, and admitted grimly by imperial biographers. Rome, for all its grandeur, was built on slavery. Everyone knows this. But what most do not know is that hidden within that system was a specific category of enslaved children, boys, selected for their beauty, purchased like jewels, and mutilated to ensure their value. They were called delicati, the delicate ones. They were ornaments, playthings, living decorations, and sometimes victims of imperial obsession. Their story is not the story Rome wanted the world to remember, but it is the story Rome deserves to be remembered by. Let us walk into the shadowed corridors of ancient power, behind the senators, behind the generals, and behind the emperors themselves, to uncover a truth the marble was always meant to conceal. Imagine the Forum Boarium, the ancient cattle market of Rome. By the 1st century CE, it sold far more than livestock. Under its open-air arcades, traders shouted prices for Syrian weavers, Gallic farmhands, Thracian gladiators, and quietly but lucratively, young boys chosen for their faces. Juvenal, Rome's great satirist, knew the place well. In his satires, he notes that such boys could cost more than estates. One lad might be valued higher than a farm that fed a family for generations. Why? Because these children were not bought for labor. They were bought for display. The criteria were chillingly specific: clear skin, big eyes, no body hair, a soft voice. Traders sometimes pre-selected them from conquered territories, noticing a child's features the way a jeweler inspects gemstones. Some were kidnapped. Some were sold by impoverished parents. Some were tributes sent to curry Roman favor. But all stood on the same wooden platform, naked for inspection. And for a certain category of buyer, wealthy aristocrats, aging senators, and particularly the imperial household, the next step was even more brutal. Castration. Rome publicly viewed castration as barbaric. Cicero condemned it. Tacitus mocked Eastern courts for the practice. Roman law on paper forbade the mutilation of male citizens. But, like so many Roman principles, the rule applied only to citizens. Slaves had no such protection. If a senator wanted a eunuch for his household, for his bedroom, or for his ego. He simply paid the surcharge and the deed was done. The procedure was agony. Ancient sources, including medical texts, later Byzantine records, and the implicit testimonies of poets, reveal mortality rates as high as 60 to 90%. Most boys died of blood loss or infection. Those who survived became valuable commodities. Statius, in his Sylvae, writes elegies for boys like Glaucius, the favored eunuch of a wealthy Roman. His poem speaks both of affection and possession, a desperate attempt to humanize a child Rome treated as a luxury good. Martial, the witty court poet, mentions another eunuch, Earinus, the beloved delicatus of Emperor Domitian. Martial praises his beauty but cannot hide the brutality behind it. He writes almost apologetically of the boy's purity, knowing it was violently manufactured. Rome permitted itself the luxury of pretending these children were fortunate, clothed in silk, fed delicacies, and kept close to the elite. But beneath the gold was trauma, a childhood stolen, a body altered, a future erased. To outsiders, delicati seemed privileged. They did not toil in mines or fields. They lived in mansions, not barracks. They wore jewelry and fine fabrics. But a gilded cage is still a cage. A delicatus belonged to his master's image. He had to remain youthful forever. Any sign of maturity might reduce his value. He couldn't grow a beard. He couldn't deepen his voice. He couldn't become a man. His entire existence depended on maintaining the illusion of boyhood. Household eunuchs were trained not in labor, but in pleasure and etiquette, how to pour wine, how to sing softly, how to walk gracefully, how to obey without hesitation. Some served as personal attendants, others as entertainers, a few as sexual companions, something ancient texts allude to but rarely state outright. The hardest truth is that many Romans did not see this as cruelty. They saw it as refinement. Delicati were conversation pieces at dinner parties, tokens of wealth, the Roman equivalent of rare pets or expensive art. But these boys were alive. They were aware, and they were trapped. No path led from delicatus to citizen, no law promised freedom. Their lives depended entirely on their patron's whims, his mood, his tastes, his desire, his boredom. Among the powerful, especially among emperors, whims could be terrifying. One of the most infamous names in this story is Sporus. Suetonius and Cassius Dio record the shocking details. Nero, the emperor who murdered his own mother and blamed Christians for a fire he likely set himself, fell in love or obsession with a young boy. Sporus was castrated on Nero's orders, not in the markets, not in secret, but at the command of the emperor of Rome. Why? Because according to Suetonius, Sporus resembled Nero's late wife, Poppaea Sabina. Nero didn't mourn her. He replaced her. He held a public wedding ceremony. Sporus wore the bridal veil. The emperor played the groom. The Roman world watched in stunned half-silence. Some laughed, some whispered, but none could stop it. In Nero's court, power had no boundaries. And Sporus, recently a boy, now a eunuch, was paraded across Rome, displayed on imperial balconies, and taken on tours of Greece like a prized trophy. After Nero's suicide, Sporus was passed between rival politicians. Eventually, he chose death rather than perform in a grotesque gladiatorial reenactment. His story is one of the most harrowing examples of how delicati were not children to their owners. They were objects. Even emperors, men who ruled the world, could not see their humanity. Another emperor, another boy. This time the emperor was Domitian, the younger brother of Titus and son of Vespasian. Seen by ancient historians as paranoid and cruel, Domitian was also known for the company he kept. Among his favorites was Earinus, a youthful eunuch of extraordinary beauty praised by Martial. Martial writes that Earinus dedicated a lock of his hair to the temple of Asclepios, the Greek healing god. The poem is gentle, almost tender, but beneath the literary elegance lies an uncomfortable truth. Earinus did not give that lock willingly. He had no agency. He existed within the emperor's shadow. Domitian, like Nero, like many elite Romans, indulged in the hypocrisy Tacitus famously condemned. Rome mocked Eastern courts for using eunuchs, while secretly demanding them. Public morality, private decadence, a familiar Roman pattern. Why did the system persist? Because it was profitable. Slave traders made fortunes breeding, acquiring, and modifying children for Roman tastes. Some traveled along trade routes stretching from Asia Minor to North Africa, searching specifically for boys with certain features. The younger the boy, the higher the price. The more symmetrical his face, the quicker the bidding rose. Eunuchs were the most expensive slaves in the empire, sometimes costing as much as small villages. Their rarity increased their value. Their mutilation guaranteed their economic worth. Senators, forbidden by law from publicly owning castrated slaves, found loopholes. They bought them through intermediaries, kept them in private villas, or claimed that the boys arrived already altered. Everyone knew the truth. Nobody cared. Rome had built an entire luxury economy on the suffering of children, yet continued to boast of its moral superiority, its sophistication, its mission to civilize the world. The contradiction was stunning, and it was intentional. The Romans were masters at hiding darkness behind marble. We know almost nothing of the individual delicati because nobody wrote down their stories. We know the names of emperors, generals, and poets. We know their triumphs, their villas, their triumphal arches. But the children? They appear only as footnotes, props, or punchlines. Sporus, Earinus, Glaucius. A few fleeting names, never their voices. What did they feel? What did they dream of? Did they hope for freedom, or had Rome convinced them to accept their fate? We do not know, but we can infer. A child separated from home, mutilated before puberty, trained to obey, conditioned to be pleasing. This was not luxury. This was trauma. Their silence is the loudest testimony of all. Rome prided itself on virtues: manly virtue, discipline, moral clarity. Senators lectured citizens on family values. Emperors commissioned statues of themselves as heroes and fathers of the nation. Yet these same men quietly exploited children. Tacitus, The sharp-eyed historian saw the hypocrisy clearly. He criticized Roman elites for condemning Eastern customs while practicing the same behind closed doors. Rome had two faces, the public mask of civilization and the private indulgence in cruelty. This divide was not an accident of history, it was a design. The empire functioned on image, glory in the front, suffering in the back. Just as gladiators died behind the facade of games, and conquered peoples suffered behind the facade of peace, delicati lived and died behind the facade of luxury. Rome's greatness was real. Roads, law, architecture, philosophy. But its darkness was real as well. The marble was always covering up blood. By the late Empire, Christian emperors condemned castration officially, though enforcement was inconsistent. Eunuchs continued to exist in imperial courts, especially in the Eastern Roman Empire. But the systematic commodification of castrated boys in Rome began to fade, not out of compassion, but because the empire was changing. Civil wars, plagues, invasions, and reforms transformed the social structure. The delicatus, once a symbol of elite decadence, became less fashionable. The slave market shrank, the economy crumbled. The luxury built on childhood exploitation could not survive an empire collapsing under its own weight. And so the delicati vanished from records, their world disappearing like sand through fingers. But their suffering should not be forgotten. History is often written by the powerful, but it is judged by the compassionate. The delicati of Rome did not build monuments, command armies, or write books. They lived in the margins, in poems, in scandals, in whispers. Yet their story reveals more about Rome than any triumphal arch. An empire is not only measured by its achievements, but by how it treated its most vulnerable. And Rome failed those children, spectacularly. They remind us that even the most admired civilizations have horrors beneath the surface. That progress and cruelty often coexist. That beauty and brutality can be intertwined. They remind us to question the past, to look beyond the marble, to see the human beings buried in the footnotes of history. Their names were few, their voices were silenced, but their story, Rome's darkest story, deserves to be told. Or in the end, Rome wanted to be remembered for its greatness, its legions, its emperors, its engineering. But history, when honestly examined, is a mirror. Rome's reflection includes conquest, innovation, and literature, but also the exploitation of thousands of children whose suffering remains eclipsed by marble monuments and glowing legends. Today, we walk through Roman ruins with awe. We read their philosophers with admiration. But for a moment, let us remember the children who walked Rome's palaces in silence, the delicati who were stripped of their futures, their bodies, and their voices. They are part of Rome's legacy too. The empire that claimed to civilize the world could not even protect its own children. And that, perhaps more than anything, is Rome's truest tragedy. This is the untold underside of imperial luxury. In ancient Rome, not all slaves worked the fields, some were chosen for looks. Called delicatus, these boys were valued above land. In markets like the Forum Boarium, they fetched prices higher than farms. Senators kept them as living ornaments. Emperors kept them as living ornaments, castrated to erase adulthood and control their bodies and lives. The Emperor Nero's relationship with Sporus, a boy forced into a mock marriage. Sexual violence became spectacle. This wasn't random cruelty. It was a system linking status, linking sex, linking ownership, hidden behind marble, hidden behind law, hidden behind talk of Roman virtue. Remembering this forces us to see ancient grandeur and its human cost, a darker chapter written in silence. Thanks for watching Shadows of History. Your support on Buy Me a Coffee helps me uncover forgotten stories, dive deeper into research, and bring more hidden moments from the past back to life.